The incident of the golden calf is known to be the most egregious sin the Israelites did to the Lord. Was it? And what exactly was a sin? Was it making an idol and bowing down to it? The simple reading of the verses seems to be saying that. It says, on the next day they arose early, offered burnt offerings, and brought peace offerings. And later, when the Lord talks to Moses, it says, they have made for themselves a molten calf, and they have prostrated themselves before it and slaughtered sacrifices toward it. However, how can it be so unwise that just 40 days after hearing the Lord himself say, do not make any molten or graven images, they do it? Furthermore, why did Aaron placate them by building an altar? Also, Moses throws the luchas at the foot of the mountain and breaks them. It uses the word takas, which usually means under. If it was the foot of the mountain, it would have said the foot of the mountain. What does it mean he threw them under the mountain? The answer is in the wording. Now, in English, it has become known as the golden calf. But really, that's not what the Torah says. It calls it the molten calf. The difference is striking. It's basically like a slogan. If you don't get the name right, you're not going to know what the right meaning is. So, one, the golden calf connotes an idol worship. The other focuses on the burning of the gold to formulate the calf. Moses goes up on the mountain, and he's there for 40 days. He leaves Aaron and Hur in charge. The people go weary of waiting for Moses. Their problem was not that they felt like Moses would not return or that they needed someone to replace Moses. Their problem was that they did not trust Aaron and Hur, and by that point, Hur seems to be disappeared, to resolve their dispute. Moses said before he left to the elders, wait here until we return to you. You have Aaron and Hur with you. Let anyone who has a legal matter approach them. At this point, Moses already taught them 4 chapters worth of civil and criminal law. Laws about damage, property exchange, rights to chattel, and lending money. This is where the people got bogged down. They didn't want Aaron, they wanted Moses. Come on, make us Elohim, that we will go before us, because this man Moses, who brought us up in the land of Egypt, we don't know what became of him. What is the word Elohim? Usually that word connotes God. However, it also refers to judge. Several times in the chapters we just talked about with the civil and the criminal law, it talks about the word judge. They were saying we need judges. Okay? In simple terms, they were asking Aaron to do what Moshe told him to do, be their judge. But they were asking more than that. Aaron realized one thing. They already had judges. Remember, Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses, already put place judges of 10, judges of 50, judges of 1,000, judges of 10,000. The problem is, as it got higher, there was only one judge left, Aaron and Hur, to resolve the heavy dispute. They wanted a panel of judges. They wanted judges like the Supreme Court. One judge is good for lower matters, but for the higher matters, they wanted a panel of judges. While Moses could be trusted to handle it himself, Aaron was not trusted with this task. Aaron had to quell this dispute. He had no instructions to create a panel of judges. Further, he knew if he created a panel of judges, that when Moses came down, the panel of judges would not likely disband. They would challenge Moses. So what did he say? He said, remove the golden earrings that are on the ears of your wives, your sons, your daughters, and bring them to me. Take your most intimate pieces of gold and give it to me. They did. What he was doing was he was attacking their wealth. He took it, he melted it down, and fashioned it into an egel masecha, a molten calf. What they said to this was something interesting. These are your judges, O Israel. They took you up from Egypt. If he made one molten calf, how come they said these, plural, are your judges? Aaron was trying to tell them as follows. All your gold is now the judge, but it's one youngling. You do not need a panel of judges. You just need one youngling, Moses. Moses was the youngest in his family. He was all that they needed. He was also trying to show them that all their individual pieces of gold now formed into one. They were all individuals, but they formed one large nation. However, when they saw that the gold melted into one mass, this is what they said. These are your judges. They are accusing each other about thinking only about gold and money. They were accusing each other of buying their way. They came up from slavery, and now all they thought about was money. Aaron seized this dispute. and knows the molten calf did not help in any way. So therefore he says, tomorrow shall be a festival to Hashem. He reminds them their true leader was the Lord. Early the next day, they rise and they offer up to Hashem burnt offerings and peace offerings. They settle down to eat and drink, but they also get up litzachik, to make merry, to laugh. Litzachik, we know, is a laugh. We know from Abraham, from Sarah, from Ishmael, from Lot's sons. It's like a laugh, whether it's in disbelief or whether it's in pleasure, but it's basically trying to distance themselves from something. They were satisfied and they were happy with themselves to continue fighting and continue pointing out others' greeds without looking at their own. This feast was not one of a holiday that was trying to bring them close to the Lord, but it was one of self-enjoyment and indulgence. The Lord tells Moses to hurry down because a nation that he elevated from Egypt, from slaves to free men, have corrupted themselves. They have wasted their freedom on jealousy and monetary disputes. They have been quick to turn aside from the way that I enjoined them. In other words, the simple laws that he taught them. They have made for themselves a molten calf and bowed low to it and sacrificed to it. And they said, these are your judges, O Israel, who brought you up from the land of Egypt. They were now deferring to the molten calf. They weren't necessarily worshiping it. Bowing doesn't mean worshiping it. It means they were deferring to it. They were deferring to gold. They were saying gold is king. The Lord forgives them after Moses reminds the Lord of two things. One, the Egyptians will scoff that they became free men only to die in the desert. In other words, their unity as slaves in Egypt will have meant nothing. And he also feels that they will become unified again in the future. And number two, the promise that was given to the forefathers that they will settle the land of Canaan, the land of Israel. There is hope yet that once they settle that land, they will then live together as one. Then the Lord is placated and he forgives them. Moses comes down from the mountain holding the luchos, the two tablets. Joshua, who's waiting for Moses by the mountain, tells him, it is a sound of war. He understands that there's a lot of dispute, but Moses is more discerning. He spoke to God already. He knew what was happening. So he knew it is neither the voice of answering victory nor the voice answering defeat. It is merely a voice of answer. In other words, the fight wasn't about who's stronger and who's weaker, who's right and who's wrong. It was merely just to make fights and to separate themselves. Now everyone was now against everyone else. There was no unity. When he saw the calf and the dancing, and we realized that not only were they acting in this way, but they were celebrating the fact that they were no longer unique, that's when he broke the luchos, the tablets, tachas hahar, under the mountain. Again, what does tachas mean? It means underneath, but it's also used many times in the Bible to mean instead of. We know famously, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth is not that. It's an eye instead of an eye, and a tooth instead of a tooth. The phrase in Hebrew being ayin tachas ayin, shein tachas shein, regel tachas regel. One thing instead in place of the other. Also, at the binding of Yitzchak, Abraham instead takes a ram to sacrifice to the Lord, and it says he took a ram tachas, his son, instead of, in lieu of his son. So what did Moses do? He understood the problem. So his solution was as follows. He didn't want them to possess the Torah. Because if you had the Torah in luchos, each person would say, oh, look, that's mine. There were two interpossessions. What Moses wanted was the mountain. And what was the mountain? They all stood at the foot of the mountain and they heard the Lord say, I am the Lord that took you out of Egypt. They all heard it together. And they all were one when they heard it together. They came out as slaves and they came up from Egypt to be people, free people, to hear the Lord's Torah. And the Lord talked to them equally as one nation, completely unified. So what Moses was doing, he was exchanging the physical form of the tablets for the mountain, which was reminding them that the Torah is not something that you possess in your hands. It's something that everyone is equally has a right to learn, to study, and to pass it along.